Hey everyone, welcome to Roundball Stew. I am Matt Stroup. It is Wednesday, July 6th, and today we'll be talking about some recent takeaways from NBA free agency and Summer League with Brad Stonebraker. That is coming up in a bit. But first, we have a special guest joining the show. It is the Celtics reporter for NBC Sports Boston, Chris Forsberg. Chris, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
What's going on, Matt? How are you?
Hey, good, man. Good. For starters, I want to ask you, this is a fantasy basketball podcast first and foremost, so I'm wondering, do you have any experience with and or opinions of fantasy basketball? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Used to love it, now hate it. Where are we at?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the last part. So I'm the guy who was terrible at updating his lineup, and eventually it
Okay.
got to the point where I was just so delinquent on it that my team was always lingering in last place, so I lost interest. Then my friends got mad because I was making stupid trades and just dragging down the league. So I self-retired from fantasy sports some years ago, just
Got it.
because, again, my own laziness. I do think I got one title with my friends, and I forget, it was like the worst roster ever. It just happened that it had
Okay.
the right mix, and that's all I hang my hat on. I don't know how people do it, like the daily stuff especially.
Yeah.
I can barely remember to brush my teeth, so credit to everybody who can kind of hang in there and do it on a daily.
Hey, you got the title, and it doesn't matter what the roster looks like. The
It was
best
like
team rarely
it was
wins.
it was like the bubble title. Like, I don't think it's a real title. I feel like there was like maybe there was like four teams in the league at that point, but
Right.
I'm gonna still own it.
It goes down. It goes down in the history books. And you're right. It is a ridiculous commitment. I don't know. I had to retire from fantasy baseball. That's the compromise I made.
Hmm.
That's the only break I give myself. All right. Well, we wanted to talk to you about this Celtics roster, and we're going to talk about this from a fantasy standpoint, but really it's just general outlooks, and that helps fantasy managers. So, obviously, after their run to the finals, the big move the Celtics made was trading for Malcolm Brogdon from the Pacers. So let's start there. What are your thoughts on this backcourt rotation when we add Brogdon to the mix? What does it mean for him, and what does it mean for everyone else?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Even Celtics fans up here, when they trade for a Malcolm Brogdon, and they're excited. But to me, Marcus Smart is coming off best year of his pro career. Finally got
Right.
thrown the keys. Finally hasn't had someone else. Like, think about it. He's always had Kyrie and Isaiah Thomas and Kemba, and now finally he's the guy. And the Celtics numbers when Marcus Smart was on the court were fantastic, especially because of that starting five and how good it was. So I do think Marcus Smart is the starter. And when I said that on Twitter after the trade, a lot of people got all up in my mentions and angry about it. Like, no, you don't trade for $22 million
Yeah.
Malcolm Brogdon and put him on the bench. Unfortunately, the Celtics have the best starting five in the NBA. So even if it's Al Horford or whoever you think might get subbed out of that starting lineup, I don't think it happens at the start of the year. And again, their focus was defense, and not that Malcolm Brogdon can't do that. I just think they have a good thing and a good mixture with that group. The other thing, Malcolm Brogdon's injury history is
Right.
something that's like hovers over all of this, and so you don't necessarily want to play that guy 30 minutes a night. I think you want to get him up 28, something like that. But I think he's more here to run the second team offense, to do what he does in crunch time, and be out there in maybe some smaller ball lineups and sharing the floor with Marcus Smart. But I'd be very surprised if Smart's minutes take a huge hit. Now, one thing I would say, in just like the overall scheme of things,
Yeah.
Celtics ran out of gas there in the finals. I think you're going to see a lot of minute totals, and maybe by that measure, a lot of their production come down a little bit next year, and that's why they beefed up their depth. I think Ime understandably rode 7, 8 guys for most of the season. I think they'd like to bring that down so that they're a little bit fresher if they're fortunate enough to be back in that title mix.
So it sounds like we think Smart's minutes and numbers are relatively safe even after the arrival of Brogdon. Brogdon, if he's running that second unit, I assume takes a pretty significant hit numbers and minutes wise. And so I'll ask you about that. Would you agree with that statement? And secondly, what about Derek White in this whole equation?
Yeah, I do think Brogdon's numbers overall, I forget what his shot total was last year, but I can't imagine he'll get up there. Now, they will need second unit creators
Right.
and shot takers. There's only so much that last year it was Derek White, Grant Williamson, and Peyton Pritchard were essentially your bench. And so you need players that are willing, or at least able to create. I think I could see Brogdon's assist numbers staying steady if those guys knock
Hmm.
down shots. Some of that will come down to how much they develop. I think we'll see a lot of Brogdon White lineups. Two ball handlers. Let White play off the ball a little bit more, maybe his more natural position. He needs to get his own shooting numbers up a little bit. I think the one concern when he got traded here from San Antonio was that he hadn't really done well with that over its course of his career. But when you play for the Celtics, and invariably you're running with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown lineups, your shot quality goes up. And so I think we'll see, Brogdon will benefit from that, not being a focal point of the defense. So it's going to be that balance. I just think back to like last year, the Celtics go out and get Dennis Schroeder. One of the reasons it didn't work was Dennis Schroeder needed, 20 shots a night and was walking the dog up the floor. And so I think they're hopeful that Brogdon is a better quarterback for that second unit and that he finds a better balance of like when to go for his own offense. But yeah, I can't see his numbers being super glitzy when he's probably the fifth or sixth best player on the team, depending on or at least the most prominent based on the minute distribution.
It feels like a guy who has been super fantasy relevant when on the floor is now kind of headed for the fringes of waiver wires and the end of rosters. And speaking of when he's on the floor, you've already alluded to this. Brogdon has averaged barely over 50 games total the last 5 seasons. Have the Celtics said anything about his health and durability and the plan for that? Has that come up at all in the wake of Brogdon arriving?
Yeah, not yet. And obviously the moratorium lifting today, maybe they'll be able to finally talk about this in the coming days. But I do think, especially when the deal goes down, a lot of the feedback that we heard from fans is, oh man, like how are they going to play all 3 of these guys? Well, Smart probably twice a year dives into the front row of the stands trying to save a loose ball and hurts himself. Derek White has been pretty durable, but again, hasn't played a ton of minutes and has been in a reserve role at times. So I do think there's minutes for everybody here at the guard position. The guy I'm worried about, and again, this is probably more on the periphery of fantasy as well, is Peyton Pritchard, who was stuck behind Schroeder at the start of last year, finally got a chance probably mid-season, made some strides, like has the ability to come in and get hot quick and knock down a bunch of threes. But if he's not getting the amount of minutes, can he maintain that production? Can he be sort of that microwave scorer for them? It's going to be a little bit more difficult. And again, I do think they want to temper the minutes with Brogdon, make sure he stays healthy, keep Smart fresh for later in the year. And so when injuries pop up, that's going to be when you're going to want Brogdon on your roster, right? Because then you just plug and play on that first unit. He's going to get a ton of assists working with that. He's going to get a ton of opportunities because Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown have taken on more of the ball handling responsibility. So it definitely, you got to pick your spots, I would say, when it comes to Brogdon and the guard rotation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's turn our attention to the 2 biggest stars on this roster, obviously Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. We saw their numbers this past season land in, especially in terms of counting stats, the surface numbers, land in a pretty similar spot to where they were the year before. Maybe a small increase here or a small decrease there. Jalen Brown's scoring went down a little bit, but overall the numbers were pretty similar. So, I mean, just looking at this team, is there room for these two to do more given the makeup of this roster? Or are we really, even though they're young guys, young ascending guys, are we kind of seeing their peak? Are we seeing them level off because of how good and how deep this team is?
Yeah, I think their usage rate will continue to climb. They've tried to put the ball in their hands. And again, that's the balance. It's so crazy that everyone here, after the Celtics had so many turnovers in the playoffs, were like, they need more ball handling. And that's part of the reason the team certainly wanted Malcolm Brogdon as a backup. But ultimately, when those guys are on the court, you want Jason Tatum with the ball in his hands. And I think we saw one of his greatest growths last season was the way he started spraying the ball around more. Not only assists, but what the assists led to. Like, there were nights where his points created off assists was off the charts. And so I think you continue to see him evolve in that role for him and Jalen to have their usage rate go up. Now, Jalen's got to be more careful with the ball. One of his things has always been he doesn't want to just be stuck in the corner and settling for catch and shoot. But both him and Tatum were sloppy at times during those finals especially. So I can't see their point production changing too much. They're still going to carry so much of that burden. Al Horford, Robert Williams, they're going to chip in there, and Marcus will get his points, and the bench guys as well. But, I think you look at Tatum and Brown, you're sitting there and saying, are they pushing 60 points combined tonight? Tatum should be up closer to 30 points per game if everything's going right, depending on the creation. And I think just eventually Tatum's going to be in that triple-double kind of category where it's not a surprise every time he does it, just because as the assist numbers go up, he's active on the glass. Needs to be because of the Celtics, the way they play on that back line. So I still think there's a ton of value in those guys, even if their minutes creep back a little bit. I think their efficiency should, equal out to what you lose in the overall production.
So 4.4 assists per game for Tatum last year. I think it was, if memory serves correctly, game one of the finals where he shot like 3 for 17 but had 13 assists. So maybe a preview of him, a spike as a playmaker, like you mentioned, which is pretty intriguing for fantasy. So Al Horford was great really good last season, and pretty much great in the postseason, as we all remember. At age 36, though, what's the sense? I mean, how much do you think they're going to manage his regular season games and minutes as we try to figure out what the hell to do with this guy as fantasy managers next season, coming off this great run late in the season.
I don't know what to tell you. Like, I feel like, and it's so funny because like he never puts up those eye popping numbers. I think he had one 30-point game this year, and it was like the highest of his career. And we're all like, really, Al Horford? All that he's accomplished, he hadn't had more 30-point games, but he's more likely to have the 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 blocks. He does fill up that stat line when he's out there. I do think you'll see his minutes in particular come down. And look, he was really revitalized coming off that OKC year and not playing a lot. But I think he played almost 3,000 minutes this past year, which is a ton for a guy his age and the playoff grind. I think they'd really like to keep him in that. It's hard because Ime does lean on his horses. So right. I can't tell you, like, I know they'd love to keep Al somewhere in that probably 25, 28-minute range, keep him away from 30. And yet invariably you get into these big games and you're leaning on him. I mean, in the playoffs, he was up at 38 some nights. So, yeah. But I think they're hopeful again. Like, he is so vital to that defense and what they do. Can you get away playing him the first 6 minutes of each half and finding a spot in the second and then leaning on him at the finish line of the fourth? But I do think, and I'm sure we'll get into it. Will Gallinari take some of those minutes? Can you go small and put Tatum at the 4? How much do you want to lean on even Robert Williams? As he starts to break out, do you want to play him upwards of 30 with his own injury history? Right. So I think the more depth you can have, whether it's at the guard or the wing position, the less you'll have to lean on those guys. So I would assume, I don't think Al's numbers will be as great as they were last year because he's just not going to play quite as much. And yet, invariably, if you need someone to make sure you're getting blocks and assists and rebounds and all the grunt work, it's too bad you can't get solid points for solid defense around the rim and deterring Giannis and all that because it's the little stuff with Al.
Yeah, he does somehow manage to turn those into stats and is a guy who I think is going to fall in fantasy drafts because of his age, and everyone's just assuming the cliff is coming at some point. But you mentioned the next guy I want to talk about, and that's Robert Williams. Is the knee a lingering concern heading into this season? And I'll ask you this, like, after a season where he basically averaged a double-double with 2 blocks, is there a ceiling for much more with this guy? I mean, we know how explosive and how athletic he is, but, can you envision much more in terms of numbers on this roster?
Oh yeah. I think we've just scratched the surface with Rob. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but whether it's mostly going to be defensively. I think you'll see the block number go back to maybe what it was earlier in his career. He was a little bit more, grounded this year. And part of that was like the injury history. I think part of it was just trying to be more disciplined, but what really unlocked the Celtics defense, and pretty much from January on, they moved him into the free safety role, kind of put him on a corner shooter, let him roam. And so I think you're just going to see the blocks. The rebounding numbers were surprisingly down. I don't know if that was more the knee or just, again, the scheme. I think some of that will have to go up if he's like the only 5 on the court. But then the offensive production, he has like a sneaky mid-range game that we haven't seen a whole lot of. I keep telling people eventually, because Brad Stevens and the Celtics do this with everybody, he will be stretched out to a 3-point shooter. I don't think it'll happen this year. But hopefully with more point guards on the roster now too, that can get him the ball where he needs to. There'll be more alley-oop lobs and dunk finishes. And so I think you'll see him go up to a more consistent 12-point per night scorer, probably getting more rebounds. I think, like I said, the block numbers are well. And the other thing is he's a great passer. A lot of as we start to see Al's numbers across the board sort of come down, I think you'll see Robert Williams start to go up, and a lot of it across the line, where it's not maybe the points and rebounds that jumps out, but he's going to have nights where he has 5 blocks. I mean, you think back first round of the playoffs last year, 9 blocks against, like, he's going to get, I keep saying he's the next guy in the NBA to get a 5-by-5 game. And I don't know when it's coming, but it's coming, because assists, steals, everything, he gets his hand in a little bit of everything.
All right, you heard it first right here. Chris Forsberg said November 18th, Robert Williams will have a 5-by-5 game. And I think you raise a great point about the assists. I'm glad you brought that up, because 2 per game this year, I mean, that's a pretty good number for a big man, and it sounds like he's got room to do even better there. And we've seen it when we've watched him play. Like, the guy is a good passer. So I think many of us diehard fantasy players are going to be fighting each other to draft the Time Lord this upcoming season. Just a couple more questions for you, man. This has been great. Another new Celtic is a former Atlanta Hawk. That's Danilo Gallinari. What are your thoughts initially on his fit and how he's going to fit into all this? Like, how much do you have a guess or a sense of how much playing time he's going to get in Boston?
Well, I'm gonna answer, and then with the Trae Young and John Collins jersey hanging behind you, I'm gonna
Yeah.
flip the script and hope you give a more educated answer. So I think
Okay.
one of the things
I'm ready.
that's shown through in the finals, especially, was that the Celtics just didn't have any veteran bench depth that they could lean on,
Mhm.
and so when Grant Williams goes cold and Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, who are you going to? They had nobody, and they had nobody really that could spell Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown on the perimeter, just in terms of eating 3 minutes at the four or the three, whatever the case may be, and just having another body out there, a big body, instead of a 6'4" guard, which was essentially all their bench was. So I do think there's a role here for him, and I do think he's going to hit a bunch of shots. He's going to get the shot quality, even as good as it was in Atlanta with Trae Young doing all those things and John Collins rolling at the basket and Capella and all. It's going to go up, and I just think he's going to probably be another 38% three-point shooter on
Yep.
high attempts, and he's going to have nights where, like 2 years ago against the Celtics, when he hit those 10 threes, and Celtics fans are salivating over that game. So I do think there's a role there. My question is, maybe it doesn't matter to fantasy because it'll happen in the postseason, but can you keep him out there consistently defensively? And that's always been the concern. I think it's not the issue of like a small guard where they're just unplayable at times, but he does have to be
Yeah.
able to switch a pick and roll and guard Steph Curry. And I don't know if he's can do that consistently at 34 years old. So that might bite into his playing time a little bit because of how defensive minded Boston is. And yet I can see so many instances where they just need a little bit of a bench spark, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
him and Brogdon are out there running pick and rolls and pick and pop threes. And so I can see the scoring numbers and rebounding too, because again, the Celtics don't have a lot of big bodies when you take Al or Robert Williams off the floor. I can see him still finding a way to kind of own those categories.
Yeah, and I think we think of him as an outside shooter, which he is still a really good outside shooter. I think the other area where Gallinari is really good is post ups, and he
Yeah.
just like he can you get a switch and he can just kind of punish like a smaller guy who gets switched onto him, and it's not always pretty, but the guy's incredibly good at getting to the free throw line. He just manufactures free throws. I mean, you're like, this is not good basketball, but he flails, he pump fakes, he throws his arms up and he gets foul calls. So that's a huge asset to a team, I think, having a guy who can do that in like the second quarter of a playoff game, and yeah, I mean, in terms of fantasy, he's probably pretty much off the radar, except in the case we were talking about with Brogdon earlier. If there's a couple guys out or something, he could be like a plug and play one night kind of guy where, I mean, I could see there being, I don't know, 5 to 10 games this season where Gallinari scores like 20 plus points, but it feels like he's going to be like a 10 point per game scorer for
Yeah.
Boston probably.
And that's what they're
All
looking
right.
for. But I love
Yeah.
your idea about the post, because the Celtics don't have a lot of guys that can kind of own that post, and Tatum's still learning to do that, and Jalen's actually pretty good, but
Yeah.
certainly the size gives him that ability to punish that matchup.
Yeah, he's really good down there. Very crafty. A guy who used to be super athletic, now really crafty. Are there any? Lastly, last thing for you. Are there any sleepers? We've hit most of this roster at this point. Any sleepers on Boston's roster we should keep an eye on? Either like a guy who could make a surprising impact from the get go, or a guy who might be one injury away.
Yeah, so I mean, the guy that pops to mind is the only one we really haven't focused on is Grant Williams, and I
Yeah.
think he was up over 40%, especially from that
Hmm.
corner. There's value there. There's gonna be shots. I do think you have to start figuring out what your Al Horford succession plan is at the 4 spot, and does Grant figure into that? There were times last season if I wondered because of Al's age if Grant would sort of slide into that starting role, and maybe Al would come off the bench. And certainly now with Brogdon in play, do the Celtics think about, sort of going double ball handler and going smaller and moving Tatum to the 4, Robert Williams at the 5? There'll be options for Ime this year that could unlock, maybe the statistical categories for some of their more familiar guys. And so I'm eager to see how that plays out. Pritchard too, again, like he's got scoring potential in him, but it's just such a dice roll to start with so many ball handlers on the court. I just go back to it and like, look, my whole thing up here, I thought Robert Williams was going to be really good from the start. And, I've kind of taken my victory lap because even though the injury history has been there, I think he
Yeah.
showed a little something gutting out those NBA finals on the knee. He had surgery right before the playoff started, came back, got a bone bruise. If he can play through stuff like that, he's
Right.
going to give you, 25, 30 quality minutes a night, even as they try to keep that number low. And I just think, if he's out there, the statistical numbers are going to pop. And some nights it might not be the points. You might be like, oh man, he only got me 2 points tonight, but he might got you 6 blocks and four assists, and
Right.
just do all that Time Lord stuff. So yeah, everybody needs to jump on him. I like if I ever got back in, if I unretired, if I got my keyboard out of the closet for fantasy season, honestly, behind Tatum and Brown, like he's my next guy for the Celtics, and probably some positional versatility. I don't know what they list him as, but obviously they use him as a sort of a power forward in terms of the defensive scheme. So jump on the Time Lord bandwagon would always be mine. That's my advice to just people I meet in the street for the first time, and but especially for fantasy players.
The people at the coffee shop are like, "Why are you telling me this? Like, why are you talking about Robert Williams?"
Man,
right
I just asked for directions. Why are you telling me about Robert Williams? So
yeah, I will say, if there's one thing I want fantasy managers who listen to this podcast to take away, it's what you said about Robert Williams. And if there's one thing I want the people in my league to hopefully not listen to, it's what you said about Robert Williams. My leagues, I should say. And by the way, I heard a little spark there. If I ever take the keyboard back out, Chris, I'm sensing it. The embers are potentially being rekindled here. So hopefully we've got a spark for you to return to the game. You can follow this guy on Twitter at Chris Forsberg. Is there an underscore at the end of that, Chris?
There is. Like, unfortunately, there's a Swedish IT manager who stole my actual name. One day I will meet him and wrestle him. So all right,
it's at Chris Forsberg _ on Twitter. Check him out on the Celtics Talk podcast as well. Anywhere you find your podcast. Chris, this was great, man. Thanks for stopping by. Tons of great insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, have a good one. All right, Brad Stonebraker is going to join me to talk free agency in a second. First, we're going to take a very quick break, and wanted to remind you that if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you'll have a shot to win thousands by predicting what will happen in Major League Baseball, on the PGA Tour, and NASCAR circuit. We also have a special contest on Tuesdays and Thursdays called Battle of the Bets, where you can agree or disagree with our experts for a shot to collect some cash. Let's bring in Brad Stonebraker right now. Brad, first things first, how are you, man? How's your summer? I think I can say that to you now. We're far enough into it. We may have some data. How's your summer?
Yeah, summer is really good. Off season's nice. It's never totally silent, but it's definitely slower and warming up definitely. So yeah, all good things. How about yourself?
Nice. Yep, good. I was gone last week. Took a trip to Maine. And I'm back, ready. It appears some things happened while I was gone, and we are going to get into some of the things that did happen and some of the things that haven't happened yet. First of all, though, Celtics-wise, anything that really stood out to you from that 20 or so minutes with Chris Forsberg? I thought there was a ton of great stuff, but what jumped out at you most of all?
Yeah, 100%. The Brogdon stuff, probably the most interesting. Our last blurb on our website did say and confirm that Brogdon would be a sixth man, which kind of was the expectation. And I honestly think it's going to help him. I think he'll play a few less minutes. I still think he'll play a ton, but I think he'll play a few less minutes every night, and therefore maybe avoid being hurt all the time. And might, if we're lucky, he'll be able to play 60, 65 games. I'm not holding out hope for that, but that would be that would be awesome, because it seems like we haven't seen that in years. So I think that's good. I think he's still a standard league guy. I think he's going to get enough minutes to do so. I just looked on PointsBet too. He's plus 2,000 for sixth man of the year, which I feel like has some value to it. There's plenty of guys ahead of him there. So any bettors out there, just a little tidbit for
I like it. Yeah, I like it. Didn't even know we were going to talk betting today, but I didn't either. What you did there. All right. Well, we've got a bunch of topics to get through here. Some are roster free agency related. Some are summer league related, and we're going to start there in the summer league because, as you may have heard, Brad, one Chet Holmgren made his summer league debut on Tuesday, and a lot of people were quite excited about this development. 23 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 6 blocks, 4 3-pointers, 18 of those points in the first half. Obviously, it's summer league, but I mean, the eye test was really impressive. So I want to get your takeaways. How do we react to this rationally? Can we react to this rationally?
Yeah, if you have Twitter and follow any basketball related anything, it was probably the first thing you saw anytime last night. These are just freakishly good numbers, like video game numbers, and it was somehow more impressive if you watched what he was doing out there. Like he dribbled up the ball and pulled up for a 3 once. He had a Dirk Nowitzki-esque fadeaway, a couple of good passes, fun blocks. I mean, what can't he do is probably what a lot of people are thinking after that. Of course, I'm excited. How can you not be? But my concern is the same as it always is with this darn Thunder team and what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And as to our knowledge, I believe they're still trying to get Mr. Wembanyama next year, or have the best chances of doing so. Yeah. But if you have this foundation of SGA and Giddey and Lou Dort, who's now making so much money, and Chet, of course, like, is that enough to maybe win and get a play-in spot? Like, is that totally crazy to think? I mean, I'm not totally sure, but I'm hoping they change their mind maybe and be like, maybe we can win some games this year, and we'll work with what we have and go from there. But I don't know.
I think the safer way to think of it in terms of fantasy is, if you draft Chet Holmgren, what a glorious 50-something games you're going to get. And maybe the experience is so overpoweringly good that you reach a point in the season, I don't know if it's January or something, where you say, man, I cannot trade this guy. I don't want to trade this guy. It's going to be different. Maybe that's the point where you trade him. You know what I mean? Like, you may reach such a great opportunity to deal him after, getting an awesome lift for the first half. Cause I just keep thinking, I just don't believe Oklahoma City until I see it. I love the young players, including Holmgren. I'm super impressed with some of the things you mentioned. Like, even though he did get like double teamed and totally got his pocket picked at half court at one point, like the ball handling was pretty impressive. Like, he's a guy who can play on the perimeter clearly. The 3-point range is there. The shot blocking is obviously legit, even though he's the skinniest player any of us have laid eyes on in who knows how long. So, I mean, I think fantasy-wise, he's going to be fantastic. It's just that one variable we keep coming back to. And I don't think that's going to – I don't know. I mean, you're trying to win your league, but fantasy is also about having fun. Like, it's going to be really hard not to draft Chet Holmgren at a certain point. And on at least some rosters. I definitely don't think I can be all in on every roster just because of the risk we talked about. But I'm going to have to get him in some leagues.
Yeah, if I don't have him somewhere, I think I'll be pretty bummed, honestly. And to his credit, also, he was playing last night with a lot of guys I think he's going to play with during the season. Like, this team is young, so a lot of guys were playing last night. I mean, Holmgren was so good that not as many people are talking about Josh Giddey. He was really good. 14 points, 5 boards, 11 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. And Jalen Williams, his summer league debut, the one without the Y, Jalen Williams. 17 points, 5 boards, a 3 on 8 of 11. So I think both of those guys, Holmgren included, of course, they're gonna play a lot, and I think it helps Chet that he's starting to build chemistry with some of these guys that he'll probably play some minutes with over the course of the season.
That is a ridiculously fun team. And it is a shame that we already have to talk about the potential of shutdowns with this team in July.
I know.
Another guy who went high in the draft, Keegan Murray, the number 4 overall pick to the Kings, was also really impressive on Tuesday. He's had a couple of eye-catching summer league lines, 24 points, 7 rebounds, 3 steals, 1 block, 2 3-pointers on Tuesday. I mean, that's kind of in line with his college stat profile, right? I mean, that's almost like what he did last year at Iowa. So, Brad, what's been your impression of this guy? Because just on the surface, before I throw to you, I'll say I'm similarly, I mean, it's not Chet Holmgren level eye-catching stuff, but Keegan Murray quietly really impressive.
Yeah, I think being quiet, like you said, might help him a little bit. I think one or two other guys are gonna be the talk of the town in terms of the rookies, and I think that could help some fantasy managers snag him later than he should go. I mean, he averaged almost 20 points per game on 51% shooting in those 3 summer league games, and that includes a 9-point game against the Heat on Sunday. And all his games were quite well-rounded. The assists weren't there, but that's really the only thing. Like you said, 3 steals and a block last night, and 1.3 steals, 0.7 blocks, 2.3 threes over those 3 summer league games. And I don't think they're the Thunder in the sense that I don't think they're going to totally blow it open after the break or after 50, 55 games they play. So I'm very much all in on him. His fantasy skill set is one that we saw in college. We were like, hey, like, this is good stuff. And now he's just proved it 3 times already, to being like, hey, I'm able to do this in summer league, yes, but at the professional level. So count me in. Another guy, if I don't get him anywhere, I'll be pretty bummed.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a guy who, the perimeter game looks really good. Like his shot is really smooth, catch and shoot. Can play in the post, can get to the basket off the dribble. I mean, just looks like a guy who can do everything. And I keep thinking about now this is different because Scotty Barnes, last year's number 4 overall pick, didn't have the eye-catching college numbers. Keegan Murray did, but I mean, I find myself thinking, man, if there's a guy another guy who are kind of maybe fly under the radar compared to the other rookies who could have a Scotty Barnes type of impact as a rookie. I mean, I think it's Keegan Murray. And I do think, like you said, kind of the fact that he's a number 4 pick, we're thinking about the other guys ahead of him might make him not fly under the radar in fantasy. I think a lot of fantasy managers will be onto Keegan Murray, but a guy who you might get a little later in drafts than some of these other rookies who could have an awesome rookie year.
Definitely.
All right. In some other offseason news, let's talk about the Nets for a minute. Shams Charania said on the Pat McAfee show on Tuesday that, quote, the Nets are making moves in preparation as if they're bringing Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving back next season. Now, worth noting that same day, they signed TJ Warren to a 1-year deal. And I want to get to Warren in a second, Brad. But first, as for this Durant-Kyrie thing, I don't find myself really lingering on that news. I mean, maybe the Nets will actually try to run it back, but I guess I don't totally take that at face value. And I don't believe that changes are not coming, if that makes sense. Either way, though, I mean, if you have thoughts on that, I want to hear them. But I think I'm more intrigued to talk about Warren as a potential late-round fantasy flyer, because whether the Nets do blow things up like we expected they might, or whether they keep this roster intact and injuries hit, I mean, this is a guy who either at the beginning of the season or at some point in the season could step into a huge role for the Nets and is kind of a forgotten guy for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this waiting game is getting a little lengthy, I will say, but we can't do anything about it. We have no power as fantasy basketball gurus here, but in due time, I love Warren. He hasn't played in like 12 years, but the last time he played, he was very, very good. Remember, he had that 53-point game in the bubble. And just was fantastic there, which seems like a lifetime ago, honestly. But still, he has game. The injury is weird, and he has taken his time with it. And I think his fantasy value will depend on what the team ends up doing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think he could legitimately be a first and at worst second offensive option if KD and Kyrie do leave.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, I would be very excited about him in fantasy leagues. If that duo does stay, he'll probably come off the bench. Nothing set in stone yet, of course, but it'd be hard to envision him starting with the makeup of their roster right now. And could he still have some value as a bench guy scoring 12, 14 points a game? I think potentially, but definitely not as much reason to be excited as compared to if KD and Kyrie were headed elsewhere.
Yeah, agreed. And just as a reminder, I mean, we last saw TJ Warren briefly in December of 2020. He is 28 now, will turn 29 in September. His last full season, the season before that, which you referenced, 19.8 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.5 blocks, 1.4 threes, stellar percentages, 53.6 from the floor, 81.9 from the line. So this is a guy who, assuming he's healthy, can take on a high volume role and be a pretty good fantasy guy, more than just points and threes. So a guy to keep on all of our radars. Meanwhile, this is actually our first podcast, Brad, since the big news Friday afternoon that the Jazz have traded one Rudy Gobert to Minnesota. Now, I think it's safe to say we feel pretty confident that Rudy is going to hold value in Minnesota. I would have similar expectations even with this odd front court experiment that the Wolves are doing. But I want to look at this from the Jazz side of things, and in particular the front court, because a lot has obviously changed there. And I mean, for starters, if you just look at the depth chart on NBC Sports Edge, there's not a lot in front of Jared Vanderbilt at power forward in Utah right now. Yeah. And at center, Hassan Whiteside, if I'm not mistaken, is still a free agent, and rookie Walker Kessler is there now. And sure, a lot can change from July 6th onward, but I mean, this is a guy who I'm already thinking, depending on what happens with Whiteside, might have a shot to start and has a very intriguing skill set, Brad.
Yeah, I think it will. It's gonna be interesting. I think it will depend on what happens with Whiteside. Whiteside might have the upper hand on Kessler just because he's been in the league longer, obviously. But I think whoever starts, I think they're going to be at the worst, like on the verge of startable in fantasy leagues, like at the very worst, and possibly startable nightly if they're healthy and doing good things. I mean, Kessler's shot blocking upside is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's a good screener. He doesn't have much of a shooting game, but he's kind of serves that Rudy Gobert role, but maybe a little more. I don't know, a little more active. Not that Gobert is not active, of course, but a little more. I don't know. I don't know, but I if Kessler does end up starting and Hassan is elsewhere, definitely count me in. But if Hassan does stay and he if he ends up starting, I would also be intrigued by that, to be honest, because we're not even a couple seasons removed from his first round finish in Portland. Remember, and even last year in a reserved role, in a reserve role, he almost got 8 boards and 1.6 blocks in less than 18 minutes per game. So the per minute stuff is really good, and it's hard to make a judgment call right now because we don't know where he's going or if he's going somewhere. But I think whoever starts at that center spot could be some fun.
For sure. And have we mentioned Walker Kessler's numbers at Auburn last year? Because if not, we need to mention them. 11.4 points, 8.1 rebounds, 1.1 steals, 4.6 blocks. That would be a 4.6. And if you want to say, oh, well, we can't take college blocks and, translate that to the NBA, sure, we can't. But we can take a 4.6 and confidently say, if that guy gets enough minutes, he is going to be at bare minimum like a 2 blocks per game guy in the NBA, given that skill set. So that is exciting. And I was just going to say, I think the Jazz head coach is barely older than Hassan Whiteside. The Jazz head coach is 34.
Yeah.
Hassan Whiteside is 33. In my mind, the Jazz, eventually this is going to trend toward Walker Kessler. I just have to think. And so I do think Hassan Whiteside, if he's back, has a chance for some fantasy relevant weeks or months. But I mean, ultimately, Walker Kessler, I think, is the guy that I would want to make sure I have. That's just where I am as of early July.
Yeah. No, I'm on the same page. I think Hassan will probably be on the move, but you never know anymore. And I do think that's a good point, the whole youth thing. I mean, right now, Mike Conley, who's the same age as his coach, and Rudy Gay is older than his coach, which is kind of wild to think about. But no, that's a great point.
All right. Also, over the weekend, Zion Williamson signed a 5-year, $193 million extension that could be worth up to $231 million. Zion Williamson, who has played 85 NBA games, Brad, gets his extension. When we last saw him, he was putting up 27 points per game, around 7 boards, 3.7 dimes, 0.9 steals, 0.6 blocks, 0.2 threes. I mean, there may be bigger risk-reward picks in fantasy leagues this year, but he's certainly near the top of that list. So where do you land on this one? Are you on the side of, I got to get Zion on some rosters, or are you on the side of, I need to see it first and I'm staying away until I see he can stay healthy?
I'm probably leaning closer to the second option, if I'm being honest. Even with those numbers you spit out, which were fantastic, he was still just a 6th round guy last year, I guess. The steals and blocks, just 1.5 combined, like you said. Not part of his game quite yet. We haven't really seen that. I very much think we can. He's so athletic, and he can block. We've seen him in college block shots like out of the gym, basically. And his free throws are just south of 70% too. And so that's already just 3 categories on paper in which he's either hurting or not so much helping you, if that makes sense. So I do think he can figure all those things out. But he is coming off of a full missed season. He did not play 1 second. And I would be surprised if he did figure everything out coming off of so much missed time. But could it happen? Very much so. And could it pay off for someone who takes him in the 3rd round? 100%. So it could pay off, but I'm trying to it is a bit of a more risky than I would like to take on someone like that. But I mean,
a lot of us play in 9 category fantasy leagues, and you didn't even mention the threes, which I mentioned earlier, 0.2. I mean, that's, if you think free throws aren't going to be great, threes aren't going to be great, steals and blocks are a question mark. That's 4 categories where you're either not getting what you need or you're not sure what you're going to get. And I'm with you that I think Zion steals and blocks can and should improve. Will that happen this year? I don't know. So for me, it's not so much well, I wouldn't draft him under any circumstances, but I think I'm going to rank him a little bit conservatively, move him down a little bit in my rankings to where if other people are being super aggressive, they're going to get him. And in a league where it's a bunch of people who are like, a little unsure, I might get him. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and he's already a big name. Like everyone knows who he is, even though he's barely played in the league. So I think because of that alone, I think someone else will take him in the late second round, and I wouldn't be all that surprised. Yeah,
I think he's going to go early in a lot of leagues, and that's fine. I mean, I think I see what you're doing. You're taking a big swing, and that can win fantasy leagues. By the way, it is Zion's 22nd birthday today, and it's a shame that Dr. A isn't here with his party hats, party paraphernalia to celebrate. Maybe next time I see Steve, we'll have a little celebration.
A belated celebration.
Yes. Okay, more max contract news. Darius Garland also got the old 5-year, $193 million max extension, which could be worth up to $231 million. This is coming off a year where he averaged 21.7 points, 8.6 dimes, 1.3 steals, 2.6 threes. Good percentages. The only downside, Brad, that I see is the high turnovers, 3.6. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on drafting Garland? Because conversely to what we just said about Zion, this is a guy I can't really target aggressively enough, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if this is me just trying to find reasons to be concerned, and it's that Colin Sexton.
I want to hear it. Bring me down a little bit. Bring me down a little bit.
Yeah. Colin Sexton, as of now, is still there, as we know. And then they signed Rubio and Raul Neto recently, I think. So they have a ton of guards, but do I think any of them are going to ruin Garland's fantasy value? Absolutely not. I think at the worst, we see Sexton stay and score quite a bit, and maybe Garland scores a few less points, but Sexton's a guy that Garland could pass to, and he could get up to 9.5. Call me crazy, but 10 assists a game maybe, and that would just help. Those are the second scarcest category in fantasy leagues, as we know. And I'm all over him. Third rounder, I think he'll be taken in the second, and if he's there in the third, I need a point guard, especially if I need a point guard, I'd 100% take him confidently at that.
I mean, if the floor is 22 points, almost 9 assists, decent steals, good threes. I mean, like you said, I mean, Sexton, the market for Sexton is pretty quiet right now. We don't know what's going to happen. If he's back, that would give me just a tiny bit more pause with Garland. But other than that, I mean, it's all systems go for me with this guy because after what he just did, I mean, would you be shocked if he came out and averaged like 24-9 this season? I mean, I certainly wouldn't be. So
not at all.
So yeah, fun times there. Last note is less fun, but I'm still interested in it. It's Jalen Smith is back with the Pacers on a 2-year deal, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic. In just 25 minutes per game after arriving with Indiana, Brad, a reminder that he averaged 13.4 points, 7.6 rebounds, 1.4 threes, and 1.0 blocks. And to me, I guess my initial thought on this is a guy who maybe could end up with some sneaky value as we think about, Miles Turner and, Patadze and the other big guys in that Pacers front court. I think we should make sure we don't forget about Jalen Smith at the end of our drafts because he's already proven he doesn't need a lot of time to produce, and he seems like a guy that the sort of retooling, rebuilding Pacers might like.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I do think Miles Turner is the X factor here. But it does bode well for Smith that he did share time with both Isaiah Jackson and Goga plenty. Like they're all guys that got pretty decent minutes, like towards the end in the whole silly season chunk of last year, and they all proved valuable at one point or another. Jackson was hurt, but Goga had some crazy stat lines that I didn't even know he was capable of, and Smith was just kind of honestly, like you said, flying under the radar a bit and just kind of doing his thing quietly, but still very, very useful for fantasy teams. So if Turner stays, I'll be more off all of them ever so slightly. But if he's on the move, which I hope he is for the sake of all these young bigs that are all pretty fantasy friendly from what we've seen, I think all of them could be draftable at some point. And Smith's probably the guy that you could get last just because he kind of like I said again, he flies under the radar. He was traded mid-season last year. Nothing really jumps off the page, but very useful numbers. So yeah, if I can get him in the later rounds, even with Turner, if I can get him like towards like the last few picks, like I'd be very thrilled with that given the upside he showed end of last year.
Agreed, sir. And that is going to do it for us on this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen. Take a minute to rate and review us as well. We will be back here on Friday to talk the latest from Summer League and free agency. I want to say thanks to everyone for listening and watching live. Big thanks to Chris Forsberg for coming by to talk Celtics. That was awesome. And thanks to you, Brad, for breaking all of this down. I will talk to you soon.
Of course. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.